Hi, welcome to my channel. My name's Chance, and today I'm going to be doing a top 10 list. So this list is going to be the top 10 games that I'm looking forward to getting back to my table. So this isn't necessarily the best games of all time for me, this isn't my most played games of all time. These are just the games that I've played at least once before and that I am excited to bring back out and get back to the table. So to make this list, I use the website Pub Meeple, where I imported all my BGG games and then just went through that process of rating head-to-head for these games. Now, when I was doing these ratings, my criteria was that essentially if I had the right play group, the right time, and the right place, which game would I want to play more? So for each head-to-head ranking, that was the criteria I selected. This means that there's going to be some games that just I love that aren't going to be on this list. And I would say that's usually the lighter games. So things like That's Not a Hat. Like, I absolutely love playing That's Not a Hat, but it's not going to make it on this list. I'll make another video on top 10 like small box games and stuff like that to try to highlight some of those games that I really do love playing that just don't make it into this top 10 ideal situation list. Now, the other thing that I did for this was I did kind of a two-step process. I rated all my games, did the head-to-head, and then I actually took that list and I just took the top 50 and I re-rated them. This is because I find that things can always shift a little bit depending on my mood, like things might move around a little bit. Even in the top 50, it's not a guarantee that one rating is going to be the same as the next day's rating. So I took those top 50 and just re-rated them, and I kind of saw how things shifted around a little bit. Overall, my top 10 is pretty constant. I would say all the games that are in my top 10 were in like my top 15 on the first pass. So that is a good indication that these are truly the games that I'm excited to get back to my table. So with that being said, let's actually get into this. And just for sitting through that and continuing to watch this, I'm going to give you a little bit of a bonus. I'm actually going to start off with my runners-up, which are going to be my 15 to 11. I won't talk about these ones as much, but I wanted to give you this because, like I said, those top 10 can kind of shift around a lot, and I think this gives a better overview of kind of my preference in games. So starting with number 15, that's going to be Smartphone Inc. So this is a fantastic economic game. It's my favorite economic game. It has a little bit of a spatial puzzle with trying to do your action selection and setting prices for your phones. And then there's a little bit of a area control type of game going on where people that have their phones set at a lower price get to sell before other people. But if you have technology unlocked that other people don't have, you might be able to sell your phones for a higher price. So this is just I find a really engaging, a very easy puzzle, but engaging in lots of player interaction. Like, I care what other people are doing, which is super important to me in games. Then number 14 is going to be Ethnos. Ethnos 2nd Edition, which I've recently reviewed, and I've fallen in love with this game right from the first play. The play is super snappy, it's pretty easy to teach, and there's a lot of variety in that base box, like 16 clans that I get to choose from when I play. So I am constantly looking forward to bringing that Ethnos back to the table. Number 13 is going to be Clockwork Wars. Now, this is one of the, I think, only games on my list that I've only played once in my top 15 here. And that's because, one, it's an out-of-print game, and number two, I think it's just super unique in the area control genre. There's a simultaneous action selection, action deployment mechanism where it takes away a little bit of that bite that you get in some of these other kind of combat-y area control games. With this one being a simultaneous deployment, you actually don't know who you're going to be in combat with until that deployment phase ends, and then you just there's a really easy way to process who wins the areas, but there's also a lot of really cool cards and technologies that are just game breaking. They're a lot of fun to play with, a lot of fun to use, and it's a pretty quick play, and I appreciate that in an area control game. Number 12, I have Nemesis Lockdown. Now, this one's a little bit more divisive, and I really enjoy this, not necessarily because it's a good game, but because it always creates a good story at the table. So the people I invite over tend to have a pretty good time with this. I have fond memories of each one of my games from this one, and I'll definitely be talking about Nemesis more in the future because I do have Nemesis Retaliation on the way, and I have a lot to say about the series, both good and bad. There's reasons why I don't think this should be in my top 15, but it's just a game where if I had the opportunity in front of me, I would be happy to set that up and play it. Number 11, so end of my runners-up here is going to be Barrage. Barrage is just an amazing little resource management, worker placement game with high player interaction, because you're playing on that central board where you're trying to dam up water and trying to kind of screw people over with just damming up the water before they can use it for their power plants, and then trying to divert water to more of your power plants to prevent other players from producing energy. It's just it's a highly interactive worker placement game, and the puzzle is amazing. I played this only once in person, but probably another 5 or 6 times on BGA. I have found out that I'm not great at this game, but every time I play it, I have a really good time because I just feel a lot of tension, and just the decisions that I make, I feel that they really matter in this game. So that's going to lead me into my top 10, and hopefully from the 11 to 15, you can see that there's certain things I value in games. One of those for this list is I appreciate games that have high player interaction. So this list doesn't really contain a lot of those more multiplayer solitaire games. It's less Euro-y. While I do really enjoy some of those games, and if one day I'll release kind of going down through my 1 through 50 list, if I look past kind of this 15 or past that 20 place, there's gonna be a lot of these Euro games showing up, kind of like Beyond the Sun and Gaia Project and stuff. Like, those are still some of my favorite games to play. But the ones that I'm most excited to get to the table usually have a good dose of player interaction, because if I'm having a social experience, I like it to really matter that those people are present. So let's kick things off with my number 10. 10 is going to be Iron Forest. So Iron Forest is a dexterity game, and I am honestly surprised that I have a dexterity game this high on my list. I'm surprised that I have one that I want to get back to the table, and to be honest, I will be playing this game tonight with a group of friends, and I am incredibly excited about getting this one back out. So Iron Forest is based on the Ice Cool system, and unfortunately, I never played Ice Cool, and I highly regret it after playing Iron Forest. I think that the design of this game is just phenomenal. It's a dual stage or dual layer, so you're gonna have a bottom layer, and then there's actually pillars to have another layer of the board, and you actually get a catapult in this game, so you're actually gonna be catapulting pieces from the bottom layer to the top layer. Then there's various goals, like maybe you need to go through certain doors, or you need to land on certain areas to trigger certain things, and the way the pieces are designed, it's just such a great idea where they put these pieces on like a rounded base, and they're kind of like these wobbly things. So you can actually just dive into this game and start doing trick shots almost right away. So like one of the things you can do with these are you can curve them, and maybe you have an objective where you're trying to go through one door, and then there's another door 180 degrees on the other side. And I've had a shot where I managed to flick one of my pieces, it went through the door that I was aiming for, but then I managed to get it right where it curved back around and went back through and came back into the same room that I flicked it from, and got 2 objectives in one turn. And that just felt amazing when that happens. I have another friend that there's a way you can actually jump the wall, so there's like walls and sections of the board, and if you flick hard enough at the top of the piece, it'll actually leap over those walls, and he managed to pull off an incredible leap and hit one of his objectives that were like, oh, that's impossible to get to. So it just is a game where I feel like the pieces are designed in a way where it is easy for people to just do cool things like right out of the gate, which I think is hard in a dexterity game. So this is one that I highly recommend, and I cannot wait to play more of it. On to number 9. So number 9 for me is Concordia. So this is one of the few Euro-y games towards the top of my list. And this one landed here because I feel that it has a lot of player interaction. I am constantly engaged on other people's turns because I care what they do. That main map, because there's blocking, there's going to be some competition over the areas of the board and like what pass that you place your colonists on, or your merchants, or whatever they are, and that will block people out from building in certain areas. So it is critical. Your placement of those pieces and your movement of those pieces is critical to your strategy, and you care about where other people are trying to go. You're trying to pay attention, like, ooh, do they want to build in this wheat city? Like, if they do, then they might be trying to get a piece there, which means I might need to get mine there first because I need to be in the other city next to it. So it has a lot of thinking about what other people care about and trying to take that into account in your turn. Then there's also the hand management, which I love this hand management. It actually, Aquatica is pretty high on my list as well. Didn't make it into the top 10, but it uses the Concordia hand management system, and I think it's just a really cool system where you have access to all your cards, but every time you're going to play one into your discard and take that action. Then at a certain point, you're just going to do kind of a refresh phase where you're going to return all of your discard back to your hand and have access to all your actions again. And managing the timing of when you do that is incredibly important in Concordia. The last thing I want to call out is the way that Concordia scoring works. So over the course of the game, you're going to be acquiring new cards. Those new cards are going to be your citizens for the game. But each citizen has kind of a different god that they're associated with, and those gods kind of are saying, like, oh, we want you to expand your merchant empire following this strategy. So each one of those gods is kind of forcing you into one strategy, and you really have to debate on what, like, if there's an action you want to do you buy that card even if that god is not aligned with what your current strategy is? Because if you're not doing things that are aligned with the end game points, you can really harm your kind of contention for first place in this game. So it's important that you select the cards that are really closely aligned with what your current strategy is. And then you have to debate on, okay, well, I really need to get colonists out, but I don't need that colonist card, so I gotta hope someone else buys this. And then you have a card that's like, it's like the senator or something, that's going to allow you to copy the top card of any one player's discard. So maybe you just plan it out where someone else, player 2, buys the colonist card, and you wait for them to play it, so then you can use your senator to trigger their card to do that colonist action. So it's a really cool strategy where you're constantly playing off of other people, and you're really focused on how to optimize your strategy while limiting your actions by getting people that are associated with one type of action, but trying to trigger off of other people's turns as well. So that brings on another part of that interaction. On to number 8. My number 8 game is Pagan, Fate of Roanoke. So this is a newer game, and this is a 2-player kind of head-to-head dueling game. Now, I compare this game a lot to Star Wars Rebellion. I'm lucky I have one of my friends likes playing kind of these head-to-head games, and we get a decent amount of time in. And Star Wars Rebellion was one of the early ones we started with. And we both had a blast playing Star Wars Rebellion. We really liked that cat and mouse game, and that hiding, and the way the Imperials are having that probe deck that are constantly narrowing down where the rebel base could be, and they're constantly seeking it out. Now, Pagan is a much lighter game, and it is one where there's a witch and a hunter, and the hunter is basically trying to find the witch, and the witch is trying to mislead the hunter into choosing the wrong citizen so they can get away with whatever their nefarious plans are, or good plans. I don't know if the witch is good or evil in this game. But they're constantly, and we're putting tokens out on these citizens on the board, these 9 citizens. And the hunter is essentially trying to put out these investigation tokens to try to narrow down these options. And kind of like Star Wars Rebellion, you have a deck of cards that the hunter is going to be drawing from, and slowly throughout the course of the game eliminating possible citizens that are going to be the witch. Then as the game continues on, the hunter runs the risk of killing off innocent civilians. And each game we played of this so far really comes down to kind of that final turn or two, and this is how I really like 2-player games. I like it to come down to where we both feel like we can win. We're both in that position where we're like, oh, I just need one more turn to do what I need to do, but is the other player going to do the thing they need to do? So I've been the hunter the times I've played this game so far, and it's usually coming down to like, okay, if I let the witch have one more turn, I'm going to lose this game, so I need to choose a citizen to eliminate and hope that I manage to choose the right one for the witch. Now, I'm not saying this is coming down to always like a 50-50 decision. You have a lot of control over trying to narrow down your options, but sometimes you just need to make that decision to prevent the witch from getting that next action. So Pagan is a fantastic game that I can't wait to return to more. On to my number 7. So 7 is going to be Inish. Now this one's going to be a bit more divisive as well, and to be honest, this used to be higher on my list, but it's definitely dropped because I do not have a group that enjoys this game. I absolutely love Inish. I think this is the best card drafting game that I've ever played. The reason I like it so much is because those cards you're going to be intimately familiar with after about 2 rounds. You're going to know all the cards that are available to draft. You're going to know all the actions that are available to other players. And each time you get this hand of cards, you're going to be like, well, I need to do all these things. And I don't want anyone else to be able to do any of these things. But I can only choose one of these cards and then pass them on. So it's a tense decision every time you get those cards. And I think this is where that's the primary part of that I love in it, is that card drafting in the beginning. But I also really like the area control, and it's actually 3 victory conditions. It's area control, area majority, and even area presence. Like there's 3 different victory conditions that players can go after. And to me, this is kind of the hallmark of a great area control game, I guess. And something where it's not just like, oh, I want to eliminate you from the map, so I win the game. This is something where you have to constantly question, oh, what strategy is this player going for? Are they going for just presence in different area, or are they going for maybe being the leader over multiple clans? So there's some kind of double think and some deduction of what you think other players are doing. And then also, can you set yourself up where you are trying to maybe like going straight for 1 victory condition generally isn't the best idea. You might want to try to spread yourself out and try to aim for 2 so 1 player can't just destroy all of your plans. So I think that, and then I also should mention before I end this, is the combat. This is one of the combat systems that I love, but I would say this is where some people really get turned off of Inish, where when combat is triggered, the players can be like, hey, you want peace? Yeah, I want peace. Let's have peace. And then essentially, you get peace. There's no combat that happens. Maybe there's some negotiation. The person can be like, oh, I'm going to leave this area anyways, so if you don't want to do combat, like, it's totally fine with me. But then that player that moved in might be like, well, I kind of don't want your pieces on the board anymore, so I don't really care that you're leaving. I just need to stop you from doing what your plans are, so we're going to do combat anyways. But then what's even more fun is when we have those situations where maybe those 2 players that are fighting, there's a 3rd player in that one. Maybe those 2 players that are kind of in contention, they're both like, oh yeah, we want peace. But that 3rd player that has no hope of winning this combat will just be like, no, I don't want you guys to have peace, I want to have combat. So then you have to, no matter what, like that combat now has to happen. Even though the 2 stronger players are both like, no, we don't want to have combat, that 3rd player forces their hand, and now those players have to decide, do we fight the stronger opponent, or do we take out that guy that doesn't want peace? So I find this an absolutely fascinating way to do combat in a game. But like I said, some people are going to bounce hard off of that. So on to number 6. And talking about bouncing hard off a game, my number 6 is Vadis. So Vadis is a negotiation game. It is a peer negotiation game where you're trying to get your animals to the star exhibit. You're moving down these tracks, moving into these various exhibits with various numbers of spots in those exhibits, and just trying to gain the votes to be able to move down these various paths. This is a game where if a person does not like negotiation, then yeah, it's obviously going to be a very poor game. But I think the negotiation is designed so well in this game. Every player is going to have an asymmetric animal ability, and the designers chose to make it so that animal ability is not for you to use, that is only for you to trade away. So the only use of your animal ability is to negotiate it away, to get yourself a good deal on your animal ability. And then also, some of the animals have stronger abilities and other ones have weaker abilities. Those weaker ones are actually going to gain you victory points for using them. So some animals might only get 1 victory point for negotiating away one of their abilities. Another player might get 2 victory points for negotiating away. So you're incentivized to try to negotiate these ways to convert those animal abilities into these victory points, which is just another thing that really kind of allows players to engage with the core of the game, which is that negotiation. The other thing that's really cool is that, well, this is where some people are going to get really angry, is the fact that the star exhibit only has a certain number of spaces. And the only way that you're going to be in contention for the victory is if you get one of your animals into that star exhibit. This means, and there's no limit to the number of animals that one player can have in there. So if there's only 5 spaces in a 5-player game, it is very possible that one player, possibly even 2 player, are not going to have pieces in that final star exhibit. They're not going to be in contention for that win. So the game it takes this arc where the first 3 players that get there, everything's kind of friendly and easygoing. It's just kind of like, okay, that's neat. And those first players probably don't have enough points yet to win, and they're just trying to end the game at this point, so no one else can be in there. But those last 2 players that are in there, things start to get a little more tense. Negotiations get a little more aggressive, and deal making becomes way more important. And this isn't the arc that I really enjoy in this game. The very last thing I'll call out is that they added these neutral pieces, the peacocks. Now the peacocks are there where if you're not able to make a deal on your turn, you're allowed to just move a peacock, and you're going to gain a victory point for doing so, and then also that peacock is going to block a space from someone else. Now those peacocks can also be bribed. Like if you're in an exhibit with that peacock, you can bribe it to gain the peacock's vote, so that way you don't have to make a deal with other players. Then finally, those peacocks can even be moved into that star exhibit, blocking some of those spaces. So this is where, like, my favorite game of Vadis was when there was 1 player left that hadn't gotten into that final star exhibit, and it came up to my turn, and that player was right after me, and there was a peacock that I could have just moved straight into that star exhibit. So I basically looked over that player and said, you know what's gonna happen, right? It's like you're essentially being blackmailed or extorted out of some victory points right now. It's either you pay me some victory points, or I'm gonna move this peacock in and you have no hope of being in contention for the win. Now, this is where I'm mentioning this example because for some people, this is like the worst thing that could possibly happen. It's like, well, that is just stupid. I don't want to play that game. Well, why would I be interested in that? But for me and that friend, this was entertaining. For him, it was like, crap, I can't believe I got myself into this situation. Now he had the choice of being like, no, I don't want to make any deals with you. Like, I don't want to make it so you're going to win. But he was in a position where he actually had a lot of victory points. He was taking a long time to get to that star exhibit. And we came to an agreement where he only gave me like 2 victory points, and then I managed to move another piece to get another couple victory points. And then once he made his move into that star exhibit, I came out barely in the lead. I think I won by 3 points against that person that moved in there. So he wanted to make that deal because he was like, I still might win if you don't have enough. So that's the type of interaction that I find very enjoyable in Vadis. But it's not for everybody. Okay, so on to my number 5. Number 5 is Oathsworn. So this is my only kind of really big box game, my only co-op game on this list. I have played Oathsworn probably 3 or 4 sessions at 2 players, but I do mostly play Oathsworn solo. Now, I absolutely love this. Is a game where I get a strong narrative experience, and some people talk about games being cinematic. For me, Oathsworn is my cinematic experience. One, I love the narration in this story or in this game. So the storytelling and the app with the audio recording, it's just so well done. I love listening to it. I love the world that these designers have built. It is, for me, very engaging. It has this cool dark fantasy, low magic thing going on where I just want to learn more about this world that the designers have created. Now, I want to be clear that this game I would not call a choose your own adventure. I kind of would describe this more as choose your experience with this story. So when you go into the narration, you're going to have choices of locations to go to, but you're going to still be kind of on rails. You're always going to be going towards that same encounter. It's just, you're going to go into that encounter maybe with some slightly different benefits or slightly different knowledge, whether or not you manage to figure out what you're fighting or not. So this is something where different information is going to be revealed to you depending on those choices you make. It's not going to give you control over your adventure, but it's just going to give you control over your experience, which I appreciate, and I understand why this is. Because if it was a full like choose your own adventure type of thing, they have to be a little looser with the narration. They have to be a little looser with everything they do. They're not going to have as much control over your experience in the game. But by doing this more controlled narration experience, they got to develop the world they wanted and develop a more streamlined and coherent story in this game, which it's a great story. Like I said, I love listening to it. And then they followed this up with an absolutely amazing boss battler. So you get to do this cool narration, then followed up with a really well-designed boss battler. It has this really cool card system where you're managing the flow of your cards. You do it one attack, and that's going to go into kind of this queue. And then you're trying to play other cards to get that queue to move, which will allow you to then get that card back to your hand. So your stronger cards are going to go further away from that queue, and then essentially it's going to be a longer time before you're able to do those stronger actions again. I think this is a really cool way to manage the kind of the cinematic aspect of this game, where, like, yes, your character has these strong abilities, but they're not going to be able to do them back to back. They're very tiring. They need to rest between them. So I think this is it's just a really cool way to handle this system. And then the way they tied in injuries. When I found out how injuries worked, I was just blown away that they did this. They managed to get an injury into the decks, and it seems like this was going to be a huge negative. But they made it so when you start the combat, those injuries don't really have any impact on you. It's kind of like your character's they're ready to go. They have a lot of adrenaline going with that initial kickoff of the battle. They're not going to be impacted by that injury too much. But as the battle goes on, that injury is going to kind of make its way back into your hand, and then it's going to force you to do something that you don't necessarily want to do, but your character's getting tired. They're getting more impacted by those past wounds that they've taken. So as that battle rages on, those injuries are going to be a little more impactful, and you have to try to figure out how to manage your character's actions around that injury card that you may have in your hand. And I think it enhances the puzzle, and everything they do in this game is just, every time they add something, it ties so well into the mechanics of the game that I'm honestly just blown away at how well they've designed Oathsworn. I mostly play, like I said, I mostly play this one solo. I'm about halfway through the game, and the only downside is that it is a big game. It is a little harder for me to get to the table, so I don't play it as much as I would like, but every time I bring it out, I have a really good time. Now we're on to my number 4. So number 4 is Lords of Vegas, and this is specifically the Lords of Vegas 2024 edition. Now, this is a game that has a healthy dose of randomness in it. There's going to be dice, there's going to be card draws, there's going to be some gambling with some probabilities, and it is going to be a little bit chaotic. But every time I bring this out, every group I've played this with, we just have a blast. There's a lot of joking, there's a lot of hooting and hollering, and just a good time at the table. I like this one enough where I bought some clay poker chips to use with this game. There are some actual clay poker chip expansion for the game. I would say they're a little overpriced, so I bought my own, which is totally fine, but this just enhanced the experience of the game for me, having those nice heavy poker chips with this Las Vegas theme. In this game, players are going to be building out casinos, and those casinos are going to earn them income, but also earn them victory points, but only if they're the boss of that casino. So there's going to be dice in these casinos. They're going to, the number of pips is kind of your power in that casino, and only one person can be boss of these casinos. So in the beginning of the game, most people have their own little individual casinos separated, and each one of those one size casinos is only going to score 1 victory point. But as you go down that victory track, there's actually going to be some barriers, some roadblocks to you advancing on it. At a certain point, you can only advance if you have 2 victory points, which means that you're going to need at least a size 2 casino. So the way this game, the arc develops, is that it's forcing you to develop bigger and bigger casinos to be able to score more victory points, to kind of get over these point thresholds on the victory point track. Because at a certain point, those 1-point casinos aren't going to be useful to you anymore. And then as people expand, casinos start merging, and when casinos merge, they can trigger power struggles. So you can only have one boss of the casino, which means that if 2 people have, let's say, 6-pip die on the same casino, they're gonna have to roll to fight it out to see who actually takes control of that casino. And then there's also the option where a player can trigger kind of a hierarchy change. They can, as long as they pay enough money, they can force all players in a casino to re-roll all their dice. And then you see who comes out on top. So this can create some really exciting moments in the game. I've had a game where one player that was essentially, they felt like they were out of the running, they were just not gonna make it. They got down to their last turn of the game, and they managed to take control of 3 casinos that they had just the worst odds of winning. but they still took that risk, and they took control of one and were like, oh, okay, good job. They took control of two, and everyone's like, oh my god, like what's happening here? Then he took control of the third, and everyone's at this table yelling and hollering like, oh, like that's the best luck that we could have seen. So I think that this just creates, if you're willing to go with kind of that randomness and a bit of that chaos in this game, this just is a really fun game to bring out. The last thing I'll call it is that gambling mechanic. So if you have a little bit of extra cash, or maybe you want to be a little risky, you can just go and gamble at someone's casino. The odds are in the house's favor, so essentially if you lose, you're going to be paying the house, which is another player at the table, the money that you just gambled with. But if you win, the house has to pay you, and they can't stop you from gambling at their casino. Their casino's open for business. And then there is also, if you roll snake eyes or roll double sixes, you're gonna double your earnings from the house. So you can really kind of hurt a player a lot if you manage to get lucky with one of those rolls, which I have. I've gotten snake eyes on a person that was playing right after me, and I basically wiped out all their money for their next turn. This can be definitely a downside for the game for some people, because if you like to have a lot of control over your turns, that type of situation could be off-putting for this game. But overall, I've always had a blast, and it's always been a joy to play Lords of Vegas. On to my number 3. 3 is Fractured Sky. I think this is a bit of an underrated gem out there that most people don't know about. Well, maybe people know about, but it's just not played as much. This is a area control bluffing game, and I will admit that I have the deluxe edition. I got it in a bit of a game trade type of situation, and I love these magnetic airships. So my version has the magnetic airships, and it has magnetic tokens, and essentially you have 3 airships, and you're gonna take that airship and put a token with a certain power value on it, and then place that on the map, so that power value is gonna be hidden from the other players. And each one of these areas you're either trying to collect resources from, or you're trying to collect Starfall. So Starfall are the victory points in the game. But the game really depends on, are you trying to gain resources for the next round, or are you trying to gain Starfall for the victory points? And there's a little bit of deduction, there's a little bit of bluffing, there's a little bit of Euro resource management. So it has there's definitely a smattering of things that you're really aiming for in the game, and this is back to kind of what I like about area control. It's not a guarantee that you know what the person's going for in a certain space. And that's where this bluffing also comes in. So there's 2 tokens that you have that are going to be a different color. So the 1 and the 10, everyone will have a different colored 1 and 10 from their other tokens. And when you place your 3 airships, you can only place out a maximum of 10 power between them. So you could do like a 2, 3, and a 5. But if you take that 10 token, you're taking your most powerful token, and your other airships have to be 0s. So your 10 would go out there, and that one has a different colored outside. Now people know, like, oh, you just put your strongest disc out, but the 1 has the same color as that 10. So it's either you just place your 1 or your 10. So now players have to debate and say, did you just put your strongest airship down? Do you really want that area? Or are you bluffing me with that 1 token and just saying like, I don't really care about this spot, I'm trying to take something else over here. But if you put out that 1 token and you scare people away, you can win an area you didn't expect to win. So this is another one of those things where it's an area control game with kind of varying strategies and varying goals for players. And overall, you're still going for that Starfall in the end, but sometimes you're just not, like maybe in certain rounds that you don't want to get any Starfall, in other rounds you do. Now, the only downside I've seen in this game is that sometimes by the 3rd round, some players can feel like they're out of it. But there's not a lot of scoring in the first 3 rounds. I would say a majority of the Starfall are in rounds 4 and 5, and that's where the game can get definitely a bit swingy. So some of those players that have been out of the game in round 3 or have felt out of the game and kind of started complaining and getting into that negative mindset, they've actually come back and been in contention for first. I've seen someone that was in last place by round 3 be in first place at the end of the game. So I do think it's important to kind of talk or teach players, or add this to the teach, and be like, hey, most of the points are going to be in that rounds 4 and 5. So don't be too concerned if you feel like you're too far behind in round 3. Overall though, every group I brought this to, this has been a hit, and I'm excited to bring this back to the table again. On to my number 2. So number 2 favorite game, or number 2 game that I am most excited to bring back to the table, is going to be Blood Rage. So I've gotten about 4 or 5 plays of Blood Rage in at this point, and I always want to bring it back out. I love bringing this game out. The reason I like it, one, it has a really cool drafting. It's not my favorite, like I said, Inish has my favorite drafting of any game, but Blood Rage's drafting is still exciting. I love getting those cards, and just, the problem is I struggle with strategy in this one, because every time I see my hand of cards, I'm just like, ooh, that card would be cool. Oh, ooh, that card would be really cool. And then this card would be really cool. And I forget what other cards I have, so I'm just taking the coolest one and I take that down, and, and I'm excited to play it during that round. And then there's other times when I'm like, oh, I don't want anyone to have that card, but I really want this card. So it has kind of a similar thing as Inish, where the cards are all pretty basic. You're going to learn them pretty quickly, and they're just exciting. Like, it's exciting to get those cards. Everything feels like it's breaking something in the game, and that makes the game enjoyable. The other thing I really like about Blood Rage is that it is easy to teach people to be competitive right out of the gate. So I feel like a lot of games, especially area control games, it can be hard for a player to be competitive with experienced players. Now, I would say if you're experienced with Blood Rage, you're definitely at a leg up. That's true of basically any game. But I found that if I do a really good job with teaching Blood Rage, those new players feel like they're competitive right away in the game. And that's super important to me. I like people to have a good introduction to a game. Now, the other thing that Blood Rage benefits from is, once again with these area control games, it has various goals that you're going for. So there's three main types of goals. Maybe it's winning combat. So winning combat can score you victory points. Maybe it's losing combat. Losing combat can actually score you a boatload of victory points. Maybe it's just being present in the location at the end of the round to achieve your quest. So having these various conditions for what you're trying to achieve with that area control portion of the game, I think is super important, because this gives you, once again, those players the flexibility, and other players trying to kind of do that double think and figure out what other people are doing, and trying to determine, like, oh, do they want to lose this area or do they want to win this area? And then you have fun moments in the game where it's like, I've been in a battle where I'm like, okay, I want to lose this battle. And then I play one of my low cards, but everyone else played low cards, and it's like, I just won a battle that I did not want to win. So to me, that creates really fun moments of just unpredictability in these area control games. And it's just like, Blood Rage is that chaos. You just embrace that chaos in this game and really enjoy what happens through the game. So once again, Blood Rage is one that I am always excited to bring out. On to number one. Now, number one is probably not going to be a huge surprise, because this is a game loved by many, and my number one is Dune, Imperium, Uprising. So for me, I actually kind of skipped Dune Imperium. I put it off for a while. I really found out about it after some expansions came out, and I was doing a lot of research and watching reviews. Some people were saying, oh, I only played Dune Imperium with this expansion, while other people were saying, oh, this expansion's garbage, I would never use it in the game. And other people were like, oh, I use all the expansions. I couldn't decide what configuration of Dune Imperium I wanted. So when they launched Dune Imperium Uprising, while this definitely upset some of the crowd in Dune Imperium, because they're like, oh, why are you doing like a version 1.5 game? Like, this is super annoying to us. For me, I was like, oh, awesome. This is my jumping in point. I can finally experience Dune Imperium. And I fell in love with the game from my first play. So it has, I will actually mention that I used to own Lost Ruins of Arnak. I think that's a very well-designed game, but it's a more Euro game and little less interactive, well, definitely less interactive. Dune Imperium Uprising replaced that game for me, because to me it has very similar mechanics, but with way more player interaction, way more tension in the game. And it's just that combination of deck building with the worker placement. Overall, I'm not crazy about pure deck building games. I played Dominion, and then things like Star Realms. I played a lot of Star Realms. Like, I really enjoy Star Realms. But overall, the core of the game is just building your deck, and then once you get your hand kind of just plays itself. You kind of just throw down your cards, and you're like, okay, well that was my action. And then determining what you want to buy to kind of build your deck to play with the probabilities of your deck. Which is, it's good, but not my favorite. Dune takes that and says, okay, yep, we still are going to focus on that deck building. You still need to care about the probabilities of what you're putting into your deck. But every time you get my hand, or draw a hand in Dune Imperium Uprising, I'm constantly debating, like, oh, I need this card to put a marker over there, but I really want to save this for that reveal phase. I feel like I have way more choices with the cards that I put in my deck than I do with other deck builders. The other thing is that the resources are very tight. This is aggravating for some players, but I find it very engaging to try to work out the Euro puzzle of this game. Now, like I said, I don't have a lot of Euro games at the very top of my list, but this one has that Euro game with high player interaction where those worker spots are blocked. But then it has the spies, which allow you to kind of reserve spots for you. It kind of helps you guarantee that you're going to be able to do things that you want to do. And just this balance of that worker blocking with your deck building, with the spies, it's just such a well-designed game with a decision space that I absolutely love. The other thing is the combat. Now, I don't play with a very aggressive group, which is why I don't get enough of my area control games played. But with Dune Imperium Uprising, I love that it's kind of like it's a bit of an opt-in situation. Like, you can't directly attack anyone, but everyone's basically making bids for the combat. They get to choose to engage in that combat system or not during a round, which then brings out this whole other level of strategy where you're trying to determine when is best for me to come into combat. Sometimes I just want to go in combat to lose the combat, so I gain some resources from being in second or third. Other times I need to figure out when can I go heavy and when can I kind of guarantee a win so I can get victory points or I can gain whatever condition is in that first place combat. So the timing and the flow of this game, like figuring those things out and figuring out what other players are going for, once again, is incredibly important in this game. So this kind of goes back to what I was talking about with Concordia, where I am constantly concerned about what other people are trying to do. I'm worried about what places they're going to be blocking from me. I'm worried about if I'm going to be able to do my actions. I'm also worried about those intrigue cards, which is one of my favorite decks in any game. That intrigue deck that adds just a little bit of chaos and a little bit of that unknown element into this kind of calculating game, I think is just a great addition to add that replayability and that excitement. So I am always happy to play Dune Imperium Uprising. And that's going to do it for my list. So that's my top 10, and remember that these are the top 10 that I am excited to get back to the table. So these are games that I have played before. Most of them I've played multiple times before, but I am the most excited about just returning to these and playing these again with a group of people. Hopefully I'll be releasing some things going back to like my top 50, because like I said, there's a lot of games that I really enjoy playing that I get to the table more often in my top 50 that don't kind of represent these top 10. My top 10 games are at that level of that high player engagement, high player interaction, and those are just the ones that, like, if I have the choice, if I have the right people, I would like to bring to the table those games that are really going to allow me to engage in this highly social experience of board games. Now, I totally understand that some people are going to enjoy those multiplayer solitaire games more, and it's just kind of having that shared experience is still a good social experience. But for me, these games like Iron Forest with dexterity, or Pagan with the bit of a cat and mouse game, or even Fractured Sky with that bluffing and trying to deceive other players, those are the types of games I love bringing out. So let me know what you think about my top 10 list. Let me know if you think if anything's missing, or maybe you have some recommendations based on the games that I like. I love hearing about new game recommendations, especially ones that I may not have heard of or played before. So that's going to do it for the video today. Thank you for watching, and of course, please like and subscribe.